Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for vocabulary for expressions and equations. If you've watched any of our other videos, this one's going to be a little bit different. We're not really answering any questions or solving anything. We are literally just going over vocabulary. So in our class, we do this before we do anything with expressions or equations, but it's good for a refresher if you've already done that too. So I've got some words that we need to know. The first one of those words is variable. And in math, a variable is a symbol that we use for an unknown value. You will most often see this, or I should say exclusively, you will see this in Math 8 as a letter. A lot of the times X and Y are used, but really it can be any letter. M, P, Q, F, doesn't matter. We use one of these variables when we don't know what value is going to go there. So in this equation that's written out, our variable is x, and it appears twice. The next word we need to know is constant. And in an equation or an expression, in math, a constant is a number that is on its own or a number that's by itself. I know in science it means something a little bit different, but in math, the easiest way to think of it is a number on its own. So this 5 is not a constant because it's not by itself. It's attached to this x. But this 11, that's a constant. This -3 is not a constant because it's attached to the x, but this 2 is a constant. Now this 2 is a little bit of a trick because it's not just a positive 2, it's actually a -2, so I'm going to circle this with it. But we'll talk about that a lot more as we get into simplifying expressions and solving equations. Let's see what's next. Next, I have coefficient, and this is going to be those other numbers. So a coefficient is a number that is being multiplied by a variable. So this 5 is a coefficient because that 5 and that x are being multiplied. When you have a number and a variable smooshed together like that, that means multiplication. So 5 and -3 are both coefficients, but let me give you another example. If I have 7m, that means I'm actually doing 7 times m. So the 7 is the coefficient. So just remember when you have that, there's like an invisible multiplication symbol there. The next word is operator. And an operator is a symbol that represents a mathematical operation. Well, if you don't know what an operation is, this is not a very helpful definition. But right here underneath, we've got exactly what it is. So if there's addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division in one of these expressions or equations, we might call that an operator. So the obvious ones are the addition and the subtraction, even though we circled that as part of the -2. I know. We'll talk about it more later. But if you look back up here at my 7m example, there's also multiplication in this equation. So there's multiplication, addition, multiplication, and subtraction. And those are all the operators in this equation. Next, I've got the word term. And term is sort of like a puzzle piece of an equation or an expression. It's one chunk of an expression or an equation. It can be a single number. It can be, which is called a constant, a variable, or it can be numbers and variables together, like coefficients and variables. So 5x is one term, 11 is one term, -3x is one term, And then the 2, but we know that's actually -2, so I'm going to circle the minus with it. Those are all terms. They're all chunks of this equation, or they're all like a piece of this equation puzzle. All right. And then I think these are our last two. We've got expression and equation. So if you remember these words from before, you're probably thinking, Miss Benson, those are both equations. I know. Don't get ahead. Okay. An equation is actually made up of expressions. So the main difference here is an expression is a term or a combination of terms and operators with no equal sign. Whereas an equation is very similar, but it must have an equal sign. Okay, so this whole thing, this is an equation because it has an equal sign. But we could also divide it into two expressions. So we can say on the left, 5x plus 11 is an expression, and on the right, -3x minus 2 is an expression. And then we just kind of ignore this equal sign in the middle. So all of these words are going to be super important over a lot of Math 8 stuff and algebra and geometry and forever. If you need to go back at any time and check what any of these mean, or if you hear us say something that you're not sure what it means in a future video, this is the one to come back and check out.